Hi everybody! The purpose of this video is for you to be able to go back and revisit our lecture at your own pace. So please make sure that while you're watching you have your notes from class out, that you stop and start the video as needed to revise or supplement the notes that you took in class so that you feel that they reflect your best understanding of this material. So our lesson 1 focus is reading very, very closely and annotating a text as we read. Now, what that looks like is a 3-step process for very critically reading and making marks on that text in order to strengthen our understanding of it. So let's go ahead and dive in. We want to start with the reminder that good reading is slow reading. And I know that that drives some of us crazy because we want to move quickly, we want to get it done. But if we're really trying to extract some meaning from that text, we want to encourage ourselves to slow down. This 3-step process is designed to do just that. Now, do we need to close read everything? Absolutely not. Right? We know that not all texts are made the same, but those that are really, really worthy of our time are definitely going to require it. And the payoff at the end will be a much deeper knowledge of that text. It will require a lot less rereading in the future because you will have sort of a documentation of your thinking as you read that text. So the payoff on the end is absolutely worth the time that you put into it. So let's first talk about close reading and annotation, our 2 objectives for this particular lesson. Close reading is a deliberate process of reading and rereading a text in order to peel back deeper levels of meaning. Essentially, every time you go back to the beginning and reread something, you're going to understand it a little bit better. It's kind of like peeling the layers of an onion until you get to that core. Now, annotating, a word that I love because there's actually the hidden word note inside of it, is basically a process of marking a text to visually represent its ideas, its structure, and the reader's mental process while reading it. Now, both of these strategies, they work hand in hand, and they serve to facilitate a deep engagement with the text. If you've ever had that feeling where you're reading something and then you get to the end of the page and you're just like, whoa, 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 what happened? How did I get here? Right? We have all had that moment. I have it frequently myself. That suggests that we're not truly engaged in what we're reading. Our eyes may be going over the paper, but we are not thinking critically as we read that text. So we want to go back to the beginning. We want to start fresh, and we want to use these skills and strategies in order to dig deeper into it and thus get more out of it. All right, so let's start with step 1. Step 1 of this process means reading to first understand what the text is literally saying. Right? So in the black and white, we're not looking between the lines, we're looking at what it literally says. Step number 1, we want to identify and define unfamiliar words, terms, or references. A lot of times if we don't understand what these keywords mean, then we don't understand what the text is actually saying. We also want to start small and build our knowledge of the text by breaking down individual sentences and short passages in the left-hand margin. It's helpful to keep a standard location for different types of annotations. That way, you have a system that you kind of go to each time that you implement it, and your eyes sort of know where to navigate for different types of information. So this may involve things like paraphrasing complicated sentences or putting them into your own words. You may also want to go back into that left-hand margin and write a simple statement or keyword that summarizes the main ideas of that particular paragraph. Now, once we've made it through the entire text for that literal meaning, we go back again and we do it all over again, but now we have a different focus. Step 2 is that we want to focus on how the information is delivered and how the text draws our attention and shapes our thinking. So we call this the text rhetoric. Every single text that is written has an intention to have some sort of effect on us. And as we read it on that second pass, we want to be thinking about what kind of effect it is having on us, and how it is doing that. Now, everything has rhetoric, believe it or not just a text. In fact, let's take a look at this little picture in the right-hand column. This is a picture of a Gothic cathedral, maybe something that you have seen in textbooks or in movies. Maybe you've even visited one if you've been able to travel. So if we think about the architecture of this structure with these very lofty ceilings, right? Think about how a space like that might make you feel. What is the intention? What is being communicated about man's place in the world simply through the design of this space, right? You can see here at the bottom of the image all of the seats. Imagine how small you might feel in a space that lofty and large, kind of reinforcing this idea that we are quite small in the grand scheme of things. All right, now as we return to a text, our job is to do the same kind of thing. We want to look closely and we want to draw inferences based on details that we observe. Now we can do that by using a few sentence stems that we call our notice and focus stems. We ask questions like, what do you find the most interesting? What do you find strange? Or what do you find revealing about this particular text? Now, I suggest that you make those kind of notes in the right-hand margin of your document. Now, we don't want to just stop with the observation. We actually want to push into some sort of inference. So we want to additionally ask the question, so what? This is called explicating a text. The word explicate actually means to fold out, right? Think about how that you reveal the deeper meaning by making those, asking those questions and making those inferences. Now, even though you've been through the text twice at this point, we're not done yet. We have one last phase. In this last rereading of the text, we have a new focus yet again. This time what we're focusing on is patterns. We want to look for repetition. We want to look for contrast. That means sort of like opposites. And we also want to look for anomalies. Anomalies means things that don't quite fit with our prior thinking. So questions that we may ask ourselves include, what repeats? What goes with what? What is opposed to what? Or what doesn't fit with our previous assumptions or understanding? Now, here's where you have a lot of freedom to develop your own system. But whatever system you come to, you want to try to be consistent with it. You want to make a series of marks that may include color coding, brackets, squares, arrows, lines to connect different things. In addition to the marks that you make visually on the text, you want to also continue to dig deeper. We want to ask that, so what? Or you want to leave a little note for yourself. Why did I highlight these words? What is the pattern that I notice? So that when you come back to your annotations, you're not scratching your head thinking like, why did I highlight that? You know, because all of those visual marks are accompanied by some sort of brief marginal annotation. All right, now let's take a look at what this actually looks like in practice. We've done all three of these phases and they all take place on the same piece of paper. So you start to see these little layers of things. Notice that I have used the left-hand margin to paraphrase challenging sentences, kind of break down what they mean. You can also notice in the right-hand margin, I have used sort of like a little cloud and a bracket to clarify some of the notice and focus thoughts that I had. I had noticed an interesting sort of contrast between sort of the dark, complicated nature of America's history with words like successful and blessings, right? And you'll also notice that I continue beyond that observation and say, perhaps she's emphasizing that we can be both proud and critical of our nation. So all of that thinking that's going on in my brain is sort of like funneled through my arm into my pencil, and then I reflect that in that little marginal note. You can also see where I have used boxes to identify challenging vocabulary, and I have then added a little definition just above. I also have noticed some patterns here, which I've actually marked in the right-hand margin as a pattern. And then I visually tried to connect the pattern with squares, highlights, and lines. Now again, totally a personal choice in terms of how you make those marks, but you do want to make sure that as you develop it, you try to build in some consistency, that each time we annotate a text, we don't want to be coming up with a whole new system. Eventually this will become second nature, and as it does, you will feel the benefits of this process, even if it feels a little cumbersome at first. All right, so let's recap. Remember that effective analysis of complex text takes time. Acknowledge that from the beginning. Just go with it, lean into it. Know that there is going to be a payoff in terms of deeper understanding on the other end of it. Close reading and annotation, we know, are two strategies that work together. They help us to critically engage with the text and draw that meaning from it. We know that it comes in phases. So that first phase, we're looking for the literal meaning. The second phase, we're noticing and focusing. We are trying to understand how the text operates, and we're making inferences as we go. And then lastly, we want to look for those patterns. What repeats? Where do we see contrast? What seems strange or doesn't fit? Last but not least, we want to keep our text markings clean and consistent. Our marginal notes should include observations and so what statements. They should be plentiful, but our actual visual highlights and underlinings should be nice and controlled. All right, everybody, hope this was helpful. Remember, feel free to go back, replay and rewind and review things as many times as needed so that we can get your notes in nice tip-top shape in anticipation of our upcoming practice.